the first thing you've got to do is work out who the father and the son is. Thanks very much for having us as speakers today. I always like to begin these sessions with asking if there's anyone in the room who's gone through the process of assisting a parent or grandparent or other loving member of a family or friend through into aged care. Always a few hands go up. And have you found it daunting when they change a simple word like a bond and they now refer to it as either RAD, DAP, DAC or a RAC? That's the world of aged care. So I'm standing here today based on personal experience. Had a change of career 25 years ago from the law into financial services, and had an elderly mother. Some people don't have to go through this process at all, so there's really no reason, unless you're an advisor, to brush up on the detail, because there's a myriad of ways your parents may depart this earth, and very often is the case, neither parent goes through the aged care pathway. My first parent, my father, passed away in palliative care, so aged care was never an issue. His last words were to look after your mum, knowing that she only wanted to come out of the house in one way, in a pine box, and never wanted to go into an aged care facility. So I tried my best. The only one in Melbourne, had sisters living in Sydney. And we had one carer, two carer, three carers around the clock, and it was a complete nightmare just managing the force of the workers, but most significantly, if anyone was on the night watch, they didn't want to have anything untoward happen under their care. So if my mother sort of turned the wrong way, made a noise 2 or 3 in the morning, without hesitation, they'd pick up the phone, dial me, and I'd be running over there in a pair of boxers and a T-shirt. Next thing you knew, I'm in the back of an ambulance going to, in Melbourne, the Alfred Hospital in Commercial Road. That was my lot in life for about 6-9 months. My mother wasn't going to listen to me. I was only a son. But finally, after the last trip to the hospital, the doctor, the authority, says, you can't go home anymore. So with a sense of relief on my part, so I said, well, what do I do now? And they said simply, quote unquote, we don't really give a damn what you do, but we need her bed back in 3 days. Go out and find her an aged care bed. So I took the next day off work. I'll never forget, it was just significant day. I went to 7 facilities that day. The first facility I went into, I thought, I'd been past it many times, had some clients in there actually. I thought, this is good, it's fresh, it's new, lovely grounds, buildings. It looks like the sort of place that I could sell the concept to and she might settle in. And everyone was walking around looking like her in the same sort of profile, walking frame, etc. Thought, this is a good place. So I walked up to the office and inquired about aged care, and they said, this is not aged care. So I said, well, excuse me, what is this if it's not aged care? They said, you're in a retirement village, it's not aged care. I said, but everyone's looking like my mother's profile. I said, that's not aged care. So if you would have asked me 12 years ago, and one of the things we do for our clients regularly is prevent them making mistakes. If I knew the difference between aged care, independent living, or any of the other alternatives, the answer would be unequivocally no. I went to 7 places that day, as I said, or 6 other places. It turns out that when I got into work the next day and finally sought and found some help, I'd only been, of the 7 places I'd been to, only 4 were aged care. And I wouldn't have known the difference. Anyhow, as a young lawyer, they teach you that valuable principle that anyone acts for themselves has a fool for a client. And all I've ever attempted to do is try and impart to my own children that just be smart enough to know what you don't know. So I needed help. I Googled looking for an aged care advisor. Nothing came up in the search. A few planners came up in the search purporting to offer the service. But when you contacted them, you realize very quickly they want to sell your product. A life cover, a death cover, an insurance bond, a funeral bond. So guys, I want someone to hold my hand, charge me a fee for service, and guide me through this very confusing, complex maze. So that was no good, that path. So I asked around, if you're lucky, you're born and bred in the state and you've got a bit of network, asked around. A friend of mine, a lawyer, gave me a card of a 72-year-old gentleman. Meanwhile, I'm sending up spreadsheets to my sisters in Sydney, not really knowing what I'm saying. There's a thing called a RAD or a DAP, extra service fees, Centrelink fees. This is just an absolute maze. Anyhow, this 72-year-old gentleman came into our office A couple of days later, within 5 minutes, he'd saved our family $250,000. It was just extraordinary. It convinced me beyond any shadow of a doubt that there must be tens of thousands of people every year unnecessarily overpaying to enter care, and then continuing, worse so, on a monthly basis, overpaying unnecessarily. What he did, who knew that a bond, the RAD, could be so negotiable? My mother wanted to go into, finally found a facility that she thought was reasonable. It was a Regis facility, and it just opened in Dandenong Road in Melbourne, if you know Melbourne. And they were asking $550 for the room, and he just rang up and said, I'll offer you $400, and they said, we'll take it. It's extraordinary. And then there's one of the fees we'll take you through called a Centrelink means tested fee that was $25,000 a year at the time, and it's about to go up to $130,000 from November the 1st. And I would have just assumed it's got to be paid. And by the time he did an assessment and lodged the documentation at Centrelink, my mother was on a pension home, we got back a nil assessment. If I'd not known any different, we would have paid that $25,000 a year for the 3 years she was in there, $75,000. Government wouldn't have given us a refund. And then there was another fee called an extra service fee, also negotiable. They wanted $100 a day, and he offered them $50, and they said, okay. So it was really an extraordinary experience. So I said to him, what are you doing at the moment? Would you mind just hanging around for a few days? I'd like to explore whether I'm the only dummy who doesn't get this. So the essence of what we created is because we have an AFSL license in our core business as investment managers, which everyone would know you need to dispense financial advice in Australia, you need that license. So a couple of days later, my partner sends out a morning note every day on the markets, and we referred to an attachment of a new financial advisory service in the aged care sector, abbreviated the story, etc., just to test the waters. And we've been busy ever since. And my son's now joined me full-time. My 2 daughters help me part-time. And I've had a few change of careers, which I've enjoyed, but I've never worked in an area that is so personally satisfying. And we have had many of your colleagues in. I was telling Ron, we had the recent Chief Justice Supreme Court in our office about a year ago, struggling to how she could help a 93-year-old mother. Heading home on a Friday night about 6 months ago, and another Supreme Court judge rang, said, I need to see you. We've had top lawyers, academics, doctors, accountants, you name it. It is confusing to everyone. So what we simply do, and then we'll take you through some of the detail, by exclusion, we're not involved in retirement living. That's state-based legislation, as you'd know, and it's a totally different world. There's no overlap between that and aged care. We're not involved in home care. And we're not really involved in the selection of a facility. We're not placement agents. Making a decision where you want a loved one to go is usually a personal decision. But once a family has made that decision, and they've got the right assessments, eligibility, the passport for entry into care, we then work with their financial circumstances in order to show them some alternative scenarios for how they can fund either the entry into care, the bond, or the RAD, and their ongoing monthly fees, and show them what drops out, what's the outcome of each of those scenarios. So they'll have complete clarity. We'll do some financial modelling for them, and they'll know what they're up for over the next few years, and hopefully have some peace of mind, and address particularly all the really quite esoteric nuances involved in the whole process, the treatment of the home, the treatment of the pension, etc. This is not a DIY exercise. It's anyone who does this once, as I could have attempted to do, we would have just paid unnecessarily more than we needed to. So that's the background to why this service exists. But now we want to turn to some data and some understanding and really share with you what the aged care world looks like now and is about to look like from November the 1st. It was going to be from July the 1st, but it was pushed out, as you know, to November. But basically we start off, as I said earlier, there's some real differences to understand between retirement living and residential aged care. Retirement living is state-based. Residential is the Commonwealth Aged Care Act. Retirement, you need to be able to live independently, whereas residential care, you can no longer live independently. Under retirement, you receive back a percentage of your funds. It's a tough model, the retirement world, usually called a deferred management fee, whereas up to November the 1st, you get 100% of the bond back. And retirement living, as you know, is a lifestyle choice and certainly not an investment choice. Under residential aged care, it's a clinical choice. And we highly recommend if anyone is entering down the retirement path, they see a lawyer, not us. We refer to a retirement. Very hard to do it. I'm sure it's the same here. The markets is pretty well sewn up in Victoria. There's two main law firms that their contracts you see with all the facilities, and that's Russell Kennedy in Melbourne and Thomson Gear. They're the two contracts we see commonly from those two firms. And it's very hard to find a lawyer to act on behalf of a private citizen entering or exiting retirement living. And in question time, we can touch on this. If you ask me, one of the most difficult parts of what we do, it's much harder to transition someone from a retirement village into care than it is from home into care, because you've got to extract yourself and get the funds out of the retirement village, which is not an easy feat. You certainly need a lawyer to act for you, a specialist in the area if you're entering, and also if you're exiting, to make sure you're exiting of all your full rights and entitlements. So we happily refer out. But let me give you an understanding of the landscape of aged care. There's currently 200,000 people in residential aged care in Australia. Australians over 85 is set to triple in the next 40 years to over 3.5 million. So there's not enough aged care beds at the moment. 50% of them is the basis of the new Aged Care Act coming in. 50% currently are running at a loss. And so by 2050, the aged care beds required will be 4 times the current amount, and will need to be about 800,000 beds will need to be available. So there will be a shortage of beds unless there's some incentive to roll out more beds. And since COVID, we've found it very hard to find beds for people. There is a shortage. And in terms of negotiation, which we'll touch on, it's based on demand and supply. You can't guarantee that you can negotiate a bed, what they're asking, but if there's a shortage of beds, they're a bit like a hotel. They only earn their fees. There's government subsidies once the bed is occupied. So you need a bit of leverage on your side if you are going to achieve a discounted price. So before I hand over to my son to take you through some technical aspects of what the new Aged Care Act is, and we'll do that by illustrating what the current situation is. It is, as said earlier, 50% of current aged care facilities are running at a loss. So this new act went through with bipartisan support, both Labor and Liberal, because it's necessary. Aged care facilities need a margin to grow, to maintain stability and to their own existence and to grow. The reality is at the moment, all fees and charges are capped under the Act. They're set under the Act. The rising cost of delivery and normal business overheads, the margins have been completely squeezed out of the industry. So they need to be incentivised. Government can't support it all to grow, expand and roll out more beds for our ageing population. I hand over to my son, who's far more technical knowledgeable than I am. Thank you.
So to explain what's changing and what the new fees are, it's necessary to first go through the current fees, what the costs are at the moment for aged care, and then we'll go through what's changing after November 1st. And as Dad said, it was meant to come in July 1st, and the facilities and most aged care providers in Australia were finding it a little bit rushed, so the government pushed it back to November 1st, but that deadline is certainly creeping up. Obviously, quick disclaimer, all of this is just general information, not financial advice. So the costs for aged care break down into 2 sections. It's what do you pay upon entry when you're entering the facility, and then what do you pay on an ongoing monthly basis. And the entry cost is called a refundable accommodation deposit. For all intents and purposes, it is a bond. Aged care is a government-run industry, and the government loves 3-letter acronyms, so they changed it to a RAD. I don't know why, but it's called a RAD now. But for all intents and purposes, that is a bond, and that bond can be paid one of 3 ways. It ranges from anywhere from $400,000 up to about $2 million, depending where you're looking, how big the room is in the facility. You're looking a variety of different factors. Option 1 for paying that is you pay, let's say, $1 million as an example. You pay the full amount up front. You might sell mum and dad's home. They might have that money in super or savings, and they decide to liquidate it and pay the full amount. When the resident passes away, it's currently entirely refundable to the estate, and it's actually guaranteed by the federal government. So if the facility goes broke, the government steps in and pays your money back. Option 2 is you do a combination. So on the $1 million example, maybe you put down $300,000 and you pay interest on the other $700,000. And option 3 is you do interest only. Now, let's see if this works. Cool. The problem with option 2 and 3 is this figure right here. The interest rate is currently set by the government. It's set at 7.78%. It's incredibly high. And it's locked in on the day that you enter care. So if you entered care today and you were there for 5 years, your interest on any unpaid bond stays at 7.78%. That rate about 2 or 3 years ago was closer to 4%. So a lot of people came to us and said, well, I'm earning more than 4% on my investments. I'm happy to pay the interest. Now, when it's closer to 8%, that's a bit harder. So that's what do you pay when you're entering the facility. And then the second part is what do you pay on an ongoing monthly basis. And how you decide to pay that first part influences the second part of your fees. So each month you're going to get an invoice, or the resident and their family will get an invoice with 4 line items on it. Often what trips people up when they come to see us is they understand 1 or 2 of the line items. They think that's all they have to pay. They don't realize you have to pay each of the 4 line items, and they add on top of each other. They get progressively more confusing. I'll explain each one. The first is called a basic daily care fee, $63.82 a day. The same across every facility in Australia, the same for every resident, non-negotiable. It seems like a very random figure, but it's actually set at 85% of the full daily pension. So we live in a fantastic country in that nobody is denied an aged care bed. If you have absolutely nothing to your name and you're just on a pension, all you need to do is divert 85% of your pension to the facility, and that will cover your aged care costs. The pension is reviewed twice a year, March 20th and September 20th, so it's coming up in a few days, and so that figure will increase when the pension increases. The second, which Dad touched on before, is called an extra or additional services fee. And as the name suggests, it's for the extra things on top. It's Foxtel, Wi-Fi, a glass of alcohol with your meals, a choice of 3 hot meals at lunch, all those extra things. And it really ranges. Some facilities don't provide those services. Some do provide it but don't charge, and others charge for it. So it can range from anywhere from $0 to $100 and $120 a day. The third one is typically the biggest line item. It's called the DAP, Daily Accommodation Payment, and that is the interest on the unpaid bond. So if you went into the $1 million room, you didn't pay anything as a bond, that's the interest that you're paying on a daily basis. And then the last one is the one that trips the most people up. It's called a Centrelink means tested fee. So the premise of this fee is aged care in Australia is a federally government-run industry. The government pays about $400 per day for every bed that is occupied in an aged care facility, all across Australia. The government then turns around to the resident and says, based on your means, your assets and your income, we want you to contribute for part of what we're paying on your behalf. It's a way of making those that can afford it pay more for their care. At the moment, that fee is capped. It has an annual cap of about $34,000 and a lifetime cap of about $82,000. So if you were considered high means, you'd pay $34,000 in year 1, $34,000 again in year 2, about $14,000 in year 3, and then you'd no longer pay that fee. So those are your ongoing monthly fees. And as an example, a monthly invoice could look something like this. You go into a facility with $1 million bond and they charge $40 a day extra services. The daily fee, the $63 a day, works out to close to $2,000 a month. Your $40 extra services is about $1,200 a month. If you didn't pay any of that $1 million bond, you're paying $213 a day in interest. Works out to about $6,500 a month, so clearly the highest of all these line items. And then if you were high means and paying that maximum means tested fee on an annual basis, could be about $3,000 a month. So you're looking at about $12,500 a month. It's quite high. Over the course of a year, it could be about $150,000. That's a worst case scenario. It's our job to get people a better result than that. But often people go into a facility, they see this example, and they leave there going, well, I can't afford aged care for my parents. And that's actually never the case. There's no circumstance where that's the case. The system is designed in such a way that everyone can afford aged care, and those that have less will pay less. So we get plenty of people coming to us and going, I really wanted this facility for mum or dad or grandma or grandpa, but I looked at the price and I can't afford it, so I'm going somewhere else. And the good news stories that we get to deliver is showing them how they actually can afford to pay for the facility. So that's the current fees and charges. That's the most simplified version. So it's pretty complicated already, but that's as simple as it gets. There's additional complexities on top. So I'll talk through a few of them here, and especially how they relate to sort of the estate aspect as well. The first is respite. Respite is a beautiful word in the world of aged care. It means try before you buy. It's a short-term stay in an aged care facility where all you have to pay is the daily care fee and the extra services fee. You don't need to worry about a bond. You don't need to worry about Centrelink. It's just a short-term trial period. It has a high transition to permanent care after that. But people often go in and they go, oh, well, respite was really easy. Permanent care must be just as easy. And it gets very confusing once you transition from respite into permanent care. That's when the bond and the Centrelink and all that kicks in. So the number one question people ask us is, do I need to sell mum and dad's home to pay the $1 million bond? And the answer is not necessarily. The home, for means testing purposes, is only valued at $206,000. Again, no idea where the government got that number from, but $206,000 is the number they've chosen. You can have a $2 million mansion somewhere and the government says it's only worth $200,000. If you then sell that home to pay your bond, you're turning a $200,000 asset into a $2 million asset, and your means tested fee is going to shoot up massively. On the other hand, for the pension, the home doesn't count as an asset for 2 years. As soon as year 3 starts, the government goes, well, now your aged care facility is your home. So this property that you own is an investment property, and therefore you're going to lose your pension. So we get panicked phone calls all the time going, what's happened to my pension? How long have you been in aged care? Oh, about 2 years or so. Well, that's why you've probably lost your pension. The bond, the RAD, for means testing purposes, it does count as an asset, but for pension purposes, it does not count as an asset. So there's all these little nuances, and most people come to us with some sort of idea about how these work, but there's all these different specifics that every circumstance is very different. On the home as well, often we get a couple come to us and no two parents age at the same rate. Mum could be getting worse than dad, and dad's playing the role of looking after mum, which takes a toll on him as well. If mum enters care and dad stays at home, dad is what's called a protected person. That means the value of the home does not count for pension purposes or means testing purposes, and therefore you may qualify for a low means or a fully supported bed in an aged care facility. Basically, you can go in with significantly reduced assets because the home is being protected. So that's another one of those cases where people come to us and go, well, we can't sell the home, therefore we can't find the $1 million to pay. What can we do? And we say, actually, you don't need that $1 million because dad's still living there. Mum is considered low means, and you can get a bed for half or a quarter of the price. And then finally, Centrelink. So Centrelink, as I'm sure anyone here who's dealt with them, is a nightmare. It's the hardest part of the whole process. Often when you go into a facility, as was the case with Dad, they'll throw this 40-page document in your hand and go, before you come speak to us, fill this out. It's actually not always necessary to fill out. If you're going to hit the maximum means tested fee and you're not going to get a pension, well, you don't have to tell Centrelink anything. There's no benefit to you telling Centrelink. So often people come and say, oh, we're starting this Centrelink paperwork. It's really confusing. We say, hold off. Figure out what you're doing first. As an example, if you've decided we're going to sell $500,000 in super and sell the home, well, if you updated Centrelink today and then you sold the super and the home, you're just going to have to update Centrelink again in a month or two. Wait till you know what you're doing, do what you need to do, and then update Centrelink at the end. So a big part of what we do is save people a lot of time and hassle in that Centrelink process as well. So an example scenario that we would look at, it's very common. Someone comes to us, they're looking at a facility that, say, is $650,000 with a $20 extra services fee. If we're lucky, we might be able to negotiate that down to $550,000. They've got about $50,000 cash, $250,000 in a share portfolio, and a home worth $800,000 a week that they could rent for maybe $500 a week or so. It's a very common example of the elderly generation being asset rich and cash poor. It's quite typical that we see. So we look at 3 typical scenarios for them and we adjust it as needed, but this is sort of the most common thing we see. The first is, okay, what if you enter care today and you don't do anything? You don't rent the home, you don't sell your shares, you don't sell the home, you just enter care because it's all happening in a panic and mum's just had a fall. You enter the aged care facility, what's it going to cost you per year? And you look at the daily care fee up there, the extra services fee, quite a small means tested fee because you're keeping the home. If you keep your home, your means tested fee is typically low, but a very high DAP because you're paying that 7.78% interest on the $550,000. So the biggest line item here is the DAP of about $43,000 a year. Ultimately, your cost is going to be somewhere around $75,000 a year. So we say, okay, well, what's going to come in to help supplement that cost? For 2 years, you're going to get the full pension because of what we mentioned. If you keep the home doesn't count for pension purposes. And you'll see here in year 3, your pension all of a sudden goes down to 0. So for the first 2 years, you're out of pocket about $50,000. But then after that, you're out of pocket about $75,000 because you don't have that pension coming in to supplement your costs of care. And ultimately, in this scenario, they would have run out of money in 5 years. If they'd entered care without getting any advice and without doing anything, about 5 years from now, they'd have nothing left. So we say, okay, well, what if we do a different scenario? Let's say we sell the 250 shares and we rent the home. We don't want to sell the home. You want to keep it for the grandkids. For whatever reason, you want to keep the home. No problem. We have the 250 shares we can use to put down a little bit towards that 550 bond. And then what you can do is you can ask the facility, take some of the fees that I owe off the 250 that you're holding. So that bond that the facility is holding is still the resident's asset. The facility is just holding it on their behalf. So in this case, you paid the 250 in year 1, and then the fees, the bond that you're holding reduces each year over the course as some of those fees get deducted off that 250. You've also got a little bit of extra income coming in from renting the home. You lose a bit of pension because your rental income counts against that pension, but still it's higher pension than the previous scenario. And ultimately, you're only out of pocket a total in the previous one. In the previous scenario, they were losing $320,000 over the course of 5 years. In this scenario, they are losing $180,000. So it's a better outcome. And then we look at scenario 3, and scenario 3 is typically what happens if you sell the home. So if you sell the home, you'll see the biggest line item here, the DAP, that was quite significant in the previous scenarios, that's dropped away entirely. You've sold your $800,000 home and you've given $550,000 to the aged care facility. You don't have to pay any interest. In addition, you get close to a full pension all the way throughout here because the money you've paid towards the $550,000 bond does not count for pension purposes. So that's quite a significant inflow that you've got as well. Your means tested fee does shoot up because you've now sold the home, but ultimately over 5 years, you're only out of pocket about $60,000. So it's a far better scenario than the other 3. So we say to families, it's never our job to make a decision for you. What we do is give you all the information on your various options so that you can make a decision that suits you best. And what we mean by that is, some families come to us and say, well, I want to get rid of the home. It's a hassle, land tax, maintenance, all that. Let's get rid of it. Great. Well, that's what it's going to look like. Others say, I really want to keep it. It has sentimental value to us. We promised it to one of our grandkids. Okay, no problem. You can keep the home, but this is how much more it will cost you per year if you decide to do that. So I'll pause there for any questions. Maybe, does that make sense, Ron? Or do you want me to keep going? Great. Any questions on that before I get into what changes from November 1st in the new Aged Care Act? No questions. Either means I did a terrible job or a great job explaining that. One or the other. So that's the current world we've been living in since 2014. That's when the previous Aged Care Act came in. This new Aged Care Act coming in about a month and a half. The reasons for the change, as Dad touched on before, aged care facilities are running at a loss. They're not making money. They're losing money. We need aged care beds more than they need us. We need to encourage more beds to be built in this country. The number one complaint that we get, people come to us and they say we cannot find a bed. And unfortunately, there's nothing that anyone can do to help there. If there's no beds, there's no beds, and you've just got to wait for beds to free up. So the government's trying to encourage more facilities to be built. In order to do that, they need the industry to be more profitable. The government has said, great, we're going to chip in a bit more, but we also need you guys to chip in a bit more too. We need the residents to pay a bit more for their care. So there's about 5 changes coming in. I'd say 2 of them are significant and the other 3 not so significant. The 2 major changes are the bond, which is currently 100% refundable. After November 1st, if you enter care then, the facility retains 2% of that bond up to a maximum of 10% over 5 years. So 2% per year. So for example, if you entered care today, you paid your $1 million and you're there for 5 years. When you leave, you get the $1 million back. If you enter care after November 1st and you pay $1 million and you're there for 5 years, you get $900,000 back. The facility keeping $100,000. The second major change is the Centrelink means tested fee that currently has a lifetime cap of $82,000. That's going up to $130,000. It's a pretty significant increase. And not only that, the threshold for who hits that means tested fee is coming down. So someone that might have, sat in the middle there might now hit that threshold. There's a few other minor changes. They're adding a daily fee called a hoteling supplement. That's about $15 a day. The 7.78%, the DAP, the interest rate, that's now going to be indexed with CPI. So it's actually going to increase every 6 months rather than staying the same. And the extra services fee is changing as well. It's quite complex how that's changing, but some residents will pay more and some will pay less. So the key implications of these changes: if you're in care before November 1st, and as I said, that deadline is fast approaching, but if you do know anyone thinking about entering care, you're grandfathered into the current system. So we've been speaking to people probably really since the start of the year, over the last 9 months or so, saying, of course, you never want to force someone into aged care. Nobody chooses to go into aged care. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. But if you are sitting on the cusp, or mum and dad or your grandparents are sitting on that cusp, you're going to be far better off entering care today than you are after November 1st. The government has calculated that about 50% of residents will be paying more for their care, but it's split, as you can see on the screen. 100% of self-funded retirees are paying more. Everyone's paying more if you're self-funded. About 75% of part pensioners will pay more, 30% of full pensioners, and if you are low means, you have less than $200,000 to your name, you'll be paying the same as in the previous system. Ultimately, if it wasn't confusing enough, they're making it more and more confusing, as the government likes to do. So it's more crucial now than ever to get aged care advice, especially if you're considering entering care before or after November 1st. And what we've calculated on an average basis, every situation is obviously different, but on an average basis that we see for our clients, you're going to be paying somewhere between $20,000 to $50,000 per year more for your care under the new November 1 system than you are in the current system. On $1 million, you're losing $20,000 a year on that 2%. The means tested fee could increase by $10,000 or $20,000 a year. You've got this additional hoteling supplement that's about $5,000 or $6,000 a year. So it's going to be somewhere between $20,000 to $50,000 more per year that you're paying for your care. So just to make it more confusing, I'll just go through this last example of someone that came to us about a month ago who said, mum's really unwell, dad's heading down that process, but he won't be ready for a year or so. We want to get mum in today and we want dad to enter care a year from now. So we looked at, okay, what is the cost going to be for mum and how is that going to differ for dad? What changes for dad under the new system? So we did quite a complex model here, looking at what are all your costs going to be for mum and then what's different for dad as well, and ultimately what's left at the end of the 5-year period. And we looked at 2 different scenarios, one saying if you didn't do anything and you just used the liquid assets that they had to pay for their ongoing fees, and the other being if they sold their investment property to pay for both of their bonds. So I'll go back to dad if you want, just to talk about the end, who we assist. So our number one most common client, I guess, is the family and the children of residents. Typically, when you're entering aged care, you're incapacitated and you can't make the decision on how you're going to fund this, although sometimes we do get beautiful older people who come into us and say, I want to make this choice before it's taken out of my hands. But typically, it's the children and the families, the grandchildren of the residents. We also assist a lot of accountants and planners. We are aged care experts. It's a very, very complex space, and we don't sort of delve into the bright, wider world of financial advice. We stay in our lane. So often people, you go to a facility and they say you need $1 million. The first thing you do is call your accountant and say, do I have $1 million? Where can I get that? And they say, well, go speak to these guys because you may not need it, or they can show you the different ways that you can afford it. And we also, more and more often, are supporting legal matters as well. So I'll let you speak about that if you'd like.
In terms of sharing in a tie-up today with lawyers, etc., I mean, the very most basic thing is often we'll see 2 or 3 children and no, always one of them, certainly none, they're not always the same financially well off as each other. And one child might put up his hand and say, I've got the money, I'm going to fund mum or dad's RAD. So first thing we would suggest, without playing as lawyers, is that they see their lawyer and have a loan agreement put in place, because the bond is returned to the estate and they'd want to be protected by having a loan agreement so that they get paid back out of that as a priority. But we've been involved in a number of consults that we've had, contacts made to us by lawyers for, I suppose, being expert witnesses in a number of particular different aspects, all been very interesting and all been very different. We had one where there was a very acrimonious divorce happening, and one party claimed that the other party who just inherited his late father's home should be part of the whole pool of assessment. And the other one came back and said, well, your father's about to pass away, and I'm sure you'll be inheriting more, making the same claim. And they defended and said, no, we need to hang on to our home because we needed to pay for his aged care in case he goes through that pathway. And then we were approached to see how accurate that was from our perspective. Home is worth $4 million, and we were able to determine that any which way they went down the aged care route, they'd need no more than about $1 million. So, and they had that besides the home. So the party that made that first accusation quickly withdrew it. So apparently the lawyers were happy with that report, that expert report we provided. We've been involved in other situations where 2 or 3 siblings may be annoyed at the one that's been doing things not right according to them, spending the money unwisely, looking after the parents or not wisely enough, etc. So we've been called in to give an opinion on that. So, that part of it is very interesting. So there's certainly a tie-up. But yes, most of our work comes as referrals from the aged care providers, because this is what typically happens. Someone will book a tour with the provider, and the facility will have a facility manager that is well trained to engender trust and goodwill. This is the right place for your mother or father, and they'll spend a half an hour or so with the family there, and then they'll sit down and ask what are the financials, and this facility manager is not equipped, nor is he licensed to give financial advice. And when he starts saying, well, there's RADs, DAPs, RACs, Centrelink, all that goodwill can easily disappear. So now most of the facilities are trained and told to say that we're not licensed financial advisors, and we strongly recommend you get some particular financial expertise in the area. So we get a lot of referrals in that way. And we also get called upon to sort of help in relation to sort of just human aspects. There may be a little old lady on their own or man and knows they need to get into aged care, but just hasn't got the wherewithal or the capability. So we'll do some community work to assist that process. And then the other areas, as Michael touched on, comes usually from planners and accountants, because, as he said, yes, when you're doing like I did that day, and I think about 3 or 4 of the facilities, throw this 40-page Centrelink form in your hand, 140 questions, and say, fill it in, you're overwhelmed, you're intimidated, no matter what your background is with feeling confident to read documents. And it's not necessary, but usually the first call you make is to your accountant. Do you know anything about this aged care stuff? What do I need to fill in? Do I need to tell them anything? And so the answer is often no need at all. It's the last thing you do if you need to do it at all. You'd only do it if it was to your benefit. So that's our story. That's what we do. We really enjoy the space. I said earlier, I've never worked in an area where there's so much client personal satisfaction. Most people come in, as I was, completely overwhelmed and confused and anxious, and hopefully we take the stress off them and they leave our office. We say to them, you can focus completely on the care needs for your parents, and please allow us to look after all the admin and financial aspects. So we enjoy that. But yep.
Just to add one final point, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room have seen a similar situation. The most common thing we see is 3 kids come in for mum and dad. One wants the best for mum and dad at any cost. One wants the most inheritance, and one is just playing on their phone and wants to get out of there and doesn't want to deal with it. So often this report that we produce plays the, an intermediary role of, I didn't decide to sell the home when the other 2 kids come and say, why do you decide to sell the home? I didn't decide to do it for my own gain. The report showed that it was the best outcome. Or I didn't decide to go down that path, but we actually got the independent advice to say that this was going to leave us the most at the end of the day, while also covering mum and dad's fees as well.
Absolutely. What's the well-known saying, where there's a will, there's a relative. So there's plenty of that we see in our room. Sometimes we have to walk out and say, you guys sort out what you want and call us when you're ready. We'd welcome any questions and take us up on any of the points we've discussed. And
thank you. I'd like a bit more explanation about the extra service fees.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some context for that in a minute. And I'd like to know what's provided in the hotelier fee in the new legislation.
Yeah.
The extra service fee interests me because homes have a strong view that gets signed for. Although it's said to be optional, it in reality, I think, is not optional.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I was hoping to avoid this level of complexity, but I can explain it.
I want to deal with these because this is a current issue in fact.
Yeah. So
Dad goes in.
Yep.
He's in his mid-90s. He is capable of enjoying those extra service fees when he goes in.
Yep.
12 months goes by, which is about the amount of time that's happened. The family now say he is not capable of enjoying any one of the many extras. He doesn't watch the big screen TV anymore. He doesn't go on outings. He doesn't have any of the other things. The home says he is still capable of enjoying those things. How do you resolve those issues? Because it's a daily fee, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, and it's a lot of money.
Yeah, the answer to that is with great difficulty. That's how you resolve the issues. So there's a difference between what's called an extra and an additional services fee, would you believe? So an extra services fee is a facility is applied to the government that basically says, we're not just going to provide this, this, and this. We are a nicer facility than your average one down the road. We need an extra $30 a day to keep the lights on. And essentially that is non-negotiable. And if you want to be here, that's the price you pay in addition to be here. An additional services fee is often more negotiable. And they brought in legislation about 12 months ago now because a lot of people were being ripped off. They were paying for things that they weren't and couldn't use. And the legislation said this. It said, if someone doesn't want to use something, too bad, you can still be charged for it. If you can prove medically or mentally, physically on medical grounds that you cannot use something, so you're going blind and they're charging for Foxtel, for example, or you're on medication where you can't drink alcohol, then the facility is not allowed to charge. So it becomes a discussion between the family and the facility on what is dad physically and mentally capable of using, and therefore what can they charge. One of the big changes that's coming in after July 1, I guess probably the only change, November 1, the only change that is going to cost residents less is they're completely shifting the extra services fee. They're now calling it a higher everyday living fee because another acronym, and it's going to be agreed upon after entering care. So right now how it works is you pay this fee, and then if you can prove you can't use it, we'll reduce it. They're switching that. So it's going to be, we're not going to charge you anything for a month. After a month, we're going to see which of the 10 services dad's enjoying, and we'll only charge you for the 6 that's being used. So it is quite difficult, that extra services fee and that negotiation with the facility.
And I've taken the facility up on behalf of a client for exactly that matter, just held ground, been very firm, and they did renege and pull back and stop charging. I think we even got a refund for some parts because they claimed exactly that situation. When they went in, they were capable, and then as the years went by, they weren't. So, we pushed that hard. But yeah, it's worth doing that. And the facilities really vary. There's some listed providers. There used to be 3 listed providers. Now I think there's only 1, Regis. Not sure if I'd want my mother was in a Regis, but I'm not sure. I can say, I hope there's no Regis shareholders here in this room, but the moment Regis became listed, I really clearly saw that the focus was on, rather than patient care, but return on shareholders. So I'm not sure I'd want to love one in a listed provider. Used to be 2 others, Estia and Japara, and they're not now. But it's worth taking up. But be careful. There's some people who are contemplating, well, should I get out of it and go into a new facility, new contract? If anyone does that, and it's after November the 1st, they'll then be contracting themselves under the new legislation from November the 1st. So you've got to be careful if you want to think you can do something that will change your situation for the better. It may not. But I'd push that. I'd push that hard. Yeah.
Oh, and the hotelier fee?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
What do you get for it?
you don't get anything is the answer. It's one of those fees where they're just getting people to pay a bit more. It's actually a fee that already exists. No one knew about it because it was being covered by the government. As the name suggests, it's hoteling things. So it's new linen, towels, all those things you get in a hotel. It's a fee that is currently being paid by the government, and they're just shifting it to the residents. So yeah, you don't get anything additional for it. It's just an additional fee you're going to have to pay after November 1st.
To share with you what we're seeing, we've noticed over the years, the government has certainly determined that it's cheaper for them to provide home care packages than it is to fund aged care. So people have been availing themselves of that and staying at home longer and going in later. And in that process, they're usually skipping the retirement or independent living sector and going into aged care later. And their stay there is less, only about an average of 18 months. So there's a real shift. We've seen some facilities who thought it was a good idea 5 years ago, and the boards originally came up the idea of time you cut the ribbon and it's open, to open up independent living on the same site, etc. And to find, all those years later when they did open, that the uptake has not been great.
So land something on that. So just 2 points relevant to that. If a lot of people want to go into retirement living, and that's totally fine. And as the previous slide suggested, it's more of a lifestyle choice than a clinical choice. If anyone comes to us and they do want retirement living, and there will be a point where when your health declines, they'll sort of kick you out and say, you need aged care now. It's a lot easier if you've gone into a facility that has retirement and aged care under the one roof on the same site. It's really one of the hardest things we do is try and extract the money from a retirement village to pay for aged care. If it's the trend now is to buy a massive plot of land and build 3 buildings, 1 retirement, 1 halfway assisted living, and then 1 aged care. Facilities are much more willing to take money out of one department and put it into another, as long as it stays under their umbrella. But to Dad's point as well of people going in later and at a more declined stage, one of the questions we ask, and nobody has a crystal ball, but we ask, how long do you think mum and dad has left? Because it really impacts. If you say it's 5 to 10 years, well, then you might be leaning towards selling the house because that interest rate's going to add up a lot over 5 or 10 years. If it's 3 to 6 months, you probably won't have time to sell the house and settlement and get the money by then. So you might be better off either renting it or just paying the interest. So that's a key component of what we look at in the modelling as well.
And I think Ron might be asking this question, but one of the most common questions we find when people come in is, should mum and dad divest themselves of their assets? Will that help with lowering the means tested fee? And the 5-year rule applies. They go back and look what's occurred over the last 5 years. So I was discussing it before with Ron. I've never seen anyone brave enough 5 years or plus out, if they think they've got that, to really strip themselves or divest themselves of their assets. So
you were planning to do.
No, because I think my son's only joined me because he's looking for an aged care home for me early